Hi again everyone, this is Niall from windowsnoob.com, and today we're going to talk some more about MBAM BitLocker management within Microsoft Endpoint Manager, Configuration Manager version 1910. That was the first version where the MBAM feature was enabled. Well, it's up to you to enable it, but that was the version where it shipped. And in this part 6, we're going to look at how you can use MBAM to actually decrypt BitLocker encrypted computers. And you're probably wondering, well, why would I want to decrypt them? The whole purpose of MBAM is to encrypt and protect your estate. Well, there are instances where you do want to decrypt computers, and two examples would be, let's imagine that you've got computers that were already encrypted, either via OSD or some other method with BitLocker, but they have the wrong algorithm. When you apply the MBAM policy to those computers, it will not re-encrypt once they're fully encrypted. So if they've got the wrong algorithm and you want to have the correct algorithm on them, you first need to decrypt them. And you want to do that in an automated way. Secondly, let's imagine you need to replace a motherboard on a computer. If you do so without decrypting, you're going to have problems, right? So to save yourself the hassle, you can decrypt before replacing the motherboard. For example, those are just two examples. So let's get stuck into it and see how we can do this exactly. If you watch my previous parts, you should have one MBAM BitLocker policy configured called MBAM finally in 1910. We're going to rename that to something more appropriate, and we're going to call it Enable BitLocker Encryption. And that's fairly descriptive because it tells us what we're doing. We're enabling BitLocker encryption, and here's our settings. All right, so enable BitLocker encryption. We'll apply. And that is our policy, and at the moment we have it deployed to a collection called All Windows 10. Let's remove that deployment, and let's go to our device collections, because we have these collections here, and let's create some new collections. So we'll create two new collections at the moment, one called Enable BitLocker Encryption. And we can limit it to all Windows 10. We're not going to populate it with any computers at the moment. Done. Okay, and now let's create another one. Another collection. We'll call this one Disable. Disable BitLocker encryption. And we'll also limit it to all Windows 10. And we're not going to populate it with any computers either, right? So now we've got two new collections, one called Disable BitLocker Encryption, the other one called Enable BitLocker Encryption. And of course, we have this other collection here called Enforce MBAM Encryption. And that enforces the enabling of BitLocker encryption, which is required in MBAM as shipped with ConfigMgr 1910 because of, well, a bug, I guess. Okay, so we've got three collections right now, and let's go back to our BitLocker policy that we had configured, and let's deploy it to the new collection we just created. So this is Enable BitLocker Encryption, and we'll deploy it to this one. And set every 7 days is probably fine in production, but this is a lab, so we're just going to get it to check for policy on a regular basis. All right, so every 1 minute. So that's deployed now to the Enable BitLocker Encryption collection. All right. Now, if you look at the policy itself, there is one that is quite interesting, and that is the Operating System Drive tab. So if you look at this paragraph here, it says, if you disable this policy, the user will not be able to put the operating system drive under BitLocker protection. Note that applying this policy after the operating system drive is encrypted will result in its decryption. So if I read that wording, what that sounds like to me is that if I change this setting here from enabled to disabled and deploy it to a collection and populate it within some computers that are encrypted, that it should start decrypting them. That's what you would think that's what this means. Only problem is it doesn't really work like that. But let's give it a go anyway for the benefit of the doubt, and let's create a brand new BitLocker policy. We'll call this one Disable BitLocker Encryption. Disable BitLocker Encryption. Okay, and we're only interested in the operating system drive here in this particular policy. And the reason for that is what I've just explained, and that's this one here. If you enable this policy setting, you will be able to configure. Okay, we're not going to do anything there. Here, if you disable this policy, the user will not be able to put the operating system drive under BitLocker protection. So we're going to set it to disabled, right? And then we're going to continue through that. We've created our policy. It's called Disable BitLocker Encryption. Let's deploy it to our newly created collection called Disable BitLocker Encryption. There it is. And we're going to speed up the policy to every 1 minute. Okay, so now we've got two separate policies. We've got two separate collections. One enables BitLocker encryption. The other one disables BitLocker encryption. At least that's the theory, right? Now we also know that the enable BitLocker encryption is tied to a CI that we created, and that is this one here. And this one enforces MBAM encryption. That's required in order to get it to work. Okay, so let's go and look at a client. If we look at this client here, it should be encrypted. Let's just verify that. Let's type in the right password first. There we go. And let's verify if this one is encrypted. Manage BDE status. That'll tell us whether it's encrypted or not. And as we can see, this one is fully encrypted. And we will also see that it has the BitLocker icon on the operating system drive. So this one is in a state that's perfect for testing decryption, right? So let's take a note of the computer name. And it's this one. And let's go back to ConfigMgr, and we're going to add that computer to our disable BitLocker encryption collection. So if we go to our device collections, we can see that here is this collection. Let's add a resource to it. So let's add a resource, search for mini, and this is the one in question. Let's add it. Okay, let's just refresh. So there it is, and we refresh again. And we want this computer to appear in the collection before we do anything further. And there it is, right? It's now populated into the collection. So let's instruct the computer to download computer policy, which is required in order for it to understand that we want it to do something. So if we look at the ConfigMgr client agent here, this one, we can see what configurations are currently deployed to it. So at the moment we have disable BitLocker encryption, revision 1, and it says compliant. Well, that's strange. Why would it say compliant? Well, really what it's saying compliant to is the settings within that policy, which could be named anything, are compliant. It isn't actually checking and verifying whether your BitLocker, whether you're encrypted or not. The fact is we have just told it to set policy, and that is exactly what it has done. So therefore, it is registering as compliant. So this might be a little bit confusing when you look at it. If we look at the registry keys that are applicable to this BitLocker policy from MBAM, we'll see that actually there's nothing there apart from 2 settings here. And these 2 settings aren't coming from MBAM BitLocker policy. No, they are coming from the CI, which we use to enforce BitLocker encryption without the user having to do anything. So these 2 keys make no difference in relation to decrypting the drive, just so you know. So if we look again if we look again at the client, we can see that it's fully encrypted. It's got our policy to disable BitLocker encryption, but nothing is happening. It is not doing anything. It will just sit there pretty much forever, and it will never decrypt this drive. So the question is, well, if that doesn't work, how do we do it? So what you can do is go back to ConfigMgr, and we're going to create another collection, and we're going to call this one Enforce MBAM Decryption. Kind of like what we did before with enforcing encryption. So you've probably guessed it. What we're going to do here is we're going to create another CI and a configuration baseline, and we're going to deploy it to this collection. And what this CI will do is set a registry key, kind of like in the previous one, except it's a different registry key. And that's it. And once that registry key is in place, you'll notice a whole different thing happening on your MBAM-enabled clients that you want to decrypt. Okay? So let's go ahead and create a new baseline. We'll call it Enforce MBAM Decryption. Okay. And give it a category. Could have created MBAM, but whatever. Okay, so now we've got our baseline. Now we can create our CI. Let's do that. And let's give it a category as before. Next, we do not want it for all, just Windows 10. And let's create a new setting. And the setting is going to be the setting that we need for setting this. So let me open up my reg keys. We're going to call this one should encrypt OS drive, right? So this is the registry key that we want to set. And as before in the previous video, we want this to be an integer because the registry key has to be a reg_d word, right? So I'm going to select that, and let's put in the full path of where we want to set this key, and that is here. And the value name itself should encrypt OS drive. All right, so that's all the settings we're setting on this page. We can click apply and then go to compliance rules. So what we want here is to create a new compliance rule, set value to 0, and basically it's going to set this value should encrypt OS drive to 0. So just so you know that when we encrypt the drive, the should encrypt OS drive reg key actually gets populated by MBAM policy, and it gets populated with a value of 1. But now we're doing the opposite. We're forcing decryption. So whether it's a bug in ConfigMgr 1910 or with MBAM, I don't know yet. But what I do know is that currently if you go through the UI and attempt to decrypt using configured MBAM policy, nothing's going to happen. So this is the workaround until we're wiser as to why it's happening. Okay? So possibly this will be fixed in 2002, but let's see. So we click OK. So set value to 0 equals 0, none. Click apply and OK. And now we have should encrypt OS drive registry value. Click next again. Here is the registry value that we're going to set it to. I'm going to set it to equal 0, right? So there's our CI. Let's go back here to configuration baselines, and we're enforcing decryption, right? So let's look at the properties of that. And we're going to add the newly created CI, and that's this one, Decryption. So let's add it. There it is. So enforce MBAM decryption revision 1, and let's click apply. Okay, there's one last step. We now need to deploy this baseline. So let's deploy. Okay, so we're going to deploy this to our newly created device collection, and that will be enforce MBAM decryption. All right, because this is a lab and we want things to go fast, we're going to set it to run every minute. So that should be all that we need to do apart from this one here. Very important setting, remediate non-compliant rules when supported. So make sure that that is selected, otherwise the registry key is never going to get set. Okay, so let's do that. Click OK. And now we have our enforce MBAM decryption compliance configuration baseline is created. It is deployed to the enforce MBAM decryption collection. And if we just look at our collection structure here, let's go here. We can see that we have enforce decryption, enforce encryption, disable BitLocker encryption. So our computer is actually in 3 collections. It does not need to be in the enforce MBAM encryption collection any longer because we're decrypting it. Now I can tell you that this configuration baseline will actually make no difference to the result here because the goal here is to decrypt the computer, all right, not encrypt. So just for cleanliness, we're going to remove it from that collection, so it should only be in the enforce MBAM decryption collection and the disable BitLocker encryption collection. In fact, you will see later that we don't even need it in here, but I guess Configuration Manager itself will have some updates, possibly in the next version, so that we can do this within MBAM policy instead of having to create a CI ourselves. Okay, so let's go back to the client. I was doing some encryption and decryption in between this video, so let's see what state it's in. As you can see, it's encrypting, fully encrypted. Okay, perfect. So let's come back here, and if we look at the registry keys, what we have are these 2 keys from the previous CI. They make absolutely no difference to the results here, so you can leave them or you can delete them. I will delete them just to show you. Okay, and let's go here and trigger machine policy, and what we should get is, we should get that, and we should also get the other, there it is. Okay, enforce MBAM decryption, right? And the last evaluation was not applicable, compliance unknown. So let's evaluate, and we can see that it says compliant. And if we created the configuration baseline correctly, that will mean that it has populated a key here. So let's just verify that. There it is, should encrypt OS drive with a reg dword value of 0. This is all we need in Configuration Manager 1910 to decrypt MBAM managed computers. And let's just verify what's happening here. As you can see, it still says fully encrypted. That's okay. Once the MBAM client agent checks for policy, which will be very shortly, it will see that registry key and it will start decrypting by itself. So let's just go in there and check where is the actual event bureau setting. MBAM. Go down to here and we'll look at the operational logs. And what do we see here? Okay, has been cleared. I think things have already started. Yes, there. So it has started decrypting auto-magically, and it will keep on going until this drive is 100% decrypted. And as you can see, this is how you can enable decryption of computers automatically within ConfigMgr 1910. So if we now go and look at our ConfigMgr client agent again, and let's just check, evaluate the two of these, you will see, interestingly, that the disable BitLocker encryption is listed as non-compliant. And the reason for this is because the policy itself isn't setting this registry key. The MBAM policy is not setting this registry key, and therefore it has an issue with it because that key is there. As you can see, the drive is in a decrypted state. If we go to CCM logs and open up this one, the BitLocker management group policy handler, you will see that it has a big red error in there, and that red error is directly related to the key that we've populated with a CI. So it says failed to delete registry value, blah, right? But if you look at the entry in the log file directly above this, you will see that it says enforcing registry value should encrypt OS drive. And when you see that, that is when it instructs the MDOP client to start decrypting if it's not already decrypted. So as long as you've got the MDOP client agent installed, which you will have because you will have encrypted your computer with MBAM, as long as you've done that and you set this registry key, then you can automate the decryption of computers using one CI. All you need is the CI. So what does that mean? It means you can go back to ConfigMgr, you can go to the MBAM configuration baselines, the BitLocker management policies, and this particular one here, disable BitLocker encryption, you can go ahead and delete that deployment altogether because it's not going to do anything. It currently is not doing anything. If we go and look at the properties of it again, the operating system drive, it should have, according to the text, if you disable this policy, the user will not be able to put the operating system drive under BitLocker protection. Note that applying this policy after the operating system drive is encrypted will result in its decryption. Only problem is that doesn't work, okay, in this version of ConfigMgr. So that is the reason why we set the CI. And if I now go back to the client here and refresh policy, because remember we've just deleted this policy here because it's showing as non-compliant. So if we do this a couple of times and check our configurations, we should only see one, and it is enforce MBAM decryption, and all that does is it sets this registry key to a value of 0. And once you have an MBAM client agent installed, as I said, it will do what it has to do and decrypt the drive. So let's just verify the status of that. And look at that. It says fully decrypted. So we now can encrypt and decrypt our computers that are managed by ConfigMgr 1910 with the MBAM feature at will. All right. So I hope you enjoyed this video. There'll be more to come. See you in the next part. Thank you.